Good evening, everyone. I'm delighted that you're here. Thank you so much for joining us. We in the parish, or I as a guest to the parish, have been talking for a while about what's going on in our world. And you turn into Advent, and now it's a time of preparation and prayer. And how are we going to do it in a holy and peaceful and happy way? We were talking about happiness a minute ago. So I am your speaker this evening, Donovan, and we are going to time ourselves to about to an hour. Okay, I'm a college professor by trade. If you can't speak within your time limit, the students start closing books and shuffling their feet. So, and showing my age, I made this in very large print, but I may not actually be able to see it. Okay, so let us launch. In this year's description of the season of Advent, the bishops state, our Advent readings call us to be alert and ready, not weighted down and distracted by the cares of the world, from Luke 21. So in this hour that we're spending together, we will talk and think and pray about how to make this possible, how to have a prayerful Advent and a joyous Christmas. Let's turn now inside our own lives to the struggles that we have. If you think about your family and friends right now, some have lost a loved one. Someone is worried about keeping their job. Someone is very lonely. When they think about Christmas, they're dreading it. They're burdened by the demand to be joyful, to have parties and celebration and fun and presents. And so, aside from what's going on in the larger world, we know ourselves we carry the burdens of our real lives and our real problems. And if, like for me right now, the burdens feel light, but I know people, the burdens are heavy. Aside from that, though, we are looking at the world around us. And I'm going to start by just identifying things that are happening in our world. Here in the United States, the recent election was filled with conflict, tension, anger, and fear. 77 million people voted for Trump. 74 million voted for Harris. There are 334 million people in the United States, so I did the math several times. That leaves 183 million people in the United States who did not vote at all. We've seen an increase in conflict, violent behavior, outrageous public insults and accusations. We hear and see people who are afraid for their safety, afraid for their health, afraid about the future of their work. We hear people voice their anger at the price of groceries, at being left behind, losing jobs, losing a chance for a college education, or to buy a home. Here in Georgia, we have experienced 11 hurricanes this season. 5 were rated as severe. Hurricane Debbie caused massive flooding in my town of Statesboro, closing roads, downing trees, and downing power lines. Schools were closed for 11 days. We were without power for 9 days. Just think for a moment of the fear and suffering of sitting in the dark in your house, wondering what is going on around you. There is war in Ukraine and in the Middle East, and starvation in the Sudan. Currently, Russia is bombing Ukraine's energy infrastructure, and winter has started. It was 35 degrees today in Ukraine. We know a ceasefire is being attempted between Israel and Hezbollah. We also know that the United States Commission on Human Rights found war crimes and crimes against humanity in Israel's warfare in Gaza. Last week, Pope Francis called for an investigation into whether Israel's actions constituted genocide. We've just endured and survived somewhat through a worldwide pandemic. Over the course of several years, the United States endured an outbreak of coronavirus, along with a brutal breakdown of ordinary work, school, travel, and family life. Over 1 million people died in the United States of coronavirus. So, this is our starting point. This is the reality of our life right now. And so tonight, in our reflection, we're beginning by acknowledging this situation. And so for the first part of our reflection, I would like you to take a few minutes to think for yourself, talk with the people near you. What is making your heart heavy? What are your worries? Just take a moment. All right, so I don't want to leave you too long in the worry, but would anybody like to share a thought or something I didn't mention that you feel like we should offer up this evening as far as our level of focus and concern? I think I pretty much ruined your evening, right? But we're moving on. Okay, so as we place ourselves before God this evening, we open our hearts to God, and we open our suffering, worried, concerned soul. And we know by faith we need to be in a better place. We want to be in a better place. We want to move forward. So, in my mind, the key to this is to acknowledge the reality of what we're living in. And I'll give you an example. Years ago, I was teaching at St. John Seminary in California and doing volunteer work in a domestic violence center. I was asked, because they were short-staffed, to do a walk-in session on Monday nights in the city where we were, in the neighborhood where we were. And it was all women, but they came in on Monday night and they would talk about their lives and the struggles they were having with their spouse or partner, their fears, and we would often talk about plans for how to leave. And that many of them were struggling and lost and suffering from what was being said to them. And over time, I created this little mantra, and it was, the sky is blue and the grass is green. That your abusive partner could tell you you're stupid, or that you can't take care of the children, or you can't be given any money because you'll waste it. But you know that you're a good person, and you're very good at taking care of the kids, and you're responsible with money, and it's just the craziness going on in the conversation. And so we would actually talk about, in that situation, when you're being covered in this, to say to yourself, the sky is blue and the grass is green. And so I think for me, you know, I'm a college professor, right? So study, thinking is very important. But to my mind, we need to just say the sky is blue and the grass is green. It is unnatural and not right for us to be enduring what we are enduring. This is not fair. This is not good. If we can be strong enough to overcome it, that's a testament to our character, to our faith, to our own inner goodness. But we don't have to say that these situations are acceptable. So, and that's what we're going to do in the next stage of the evening, which is let's see if we can move beyond this. And just because, of course, I've had more time to think about this topic than you have, here are a few insights. You are surrounded by people who are thinking and feeling very differently than you are, regardless of which way you voted. People in your family, people at work, people in your school, people in your neighborhood. And we have to come to grips with that and figure out how to respond. Secondly, we are living with and maybe tolerating an ugliness in public life. And I just want to remind you, we all had grandparents. We all have grandparents. I'm a grandmother. What would your grandmother say to the things being said publicly? I wouldn't want to tell you what my grandmother would say because, oh, she'd have a few things to say about you better straighten your act out. So we're tolerating this ugliness. And then there are practical problems facing us and a world that is struggling. So we're going to seek wisdom from our tradition, from the Catholic Church. These are hard times, and we need to be inspired by what the Church can teach us, how the Church can lead us. And so I want to look back to the teachings of Vatican II. The Council of Bishops met between 1962 and 1965, and they produced a set of modern teachings for us. Looking at that era in history, what problems did they face? The early 20th century produced 2 world wars. The Great Depression happened. The first use of nuclear weapons when the United States bombed Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Khrushchev assumed power in Russia, and the Cold War had begun. The Berlin Wall was built. The Cuban Missile Crisis occurred in 1962, and the war in Vietnam was underway. To my mind, we can't say that the bishops and the theologians preparing for that council could not understand a world in trouble like ours. They did. And one of the documents that emerged from the council is called the Pastoral Constitution on the Church in the Modern World. And the opening line of this text reads, "The joy and hope, the grief and anguish of the men of our time, especially of those who are poor or afflicted in any way, are the joy and hope, the grief and anguish of the followers of Christ as well." The document moves from this principle to presenting insights about family life, culture, the economy, the common good, democracy, the arms race, curbing the savagery of war, and working towards preventing wars with international accords. As Catholics and people of good faith, we then are called by the Church to step into the world and do something. The joy and the hope, the grief and anguish of the people around you are your joy and hope, your grief and anguish. And the Church has committed to step forward. So now in the season of Advent, This is a perfect time for us to refocus our time and our energy and our prayer to help create a world that can celebrate the joy of Christmas. So how are we going to do that? Step 1. I call it your code of conduct. The next reflection, you're going to take a few minutes and reflect and consider on how you are living day to day. How are you coping now? What do you do? What do you think? What do you believe? Who are you? What are your values? What are your ways to deal with worry and conflict? So, take a few minutes. What is your code of conduct? What are the rules you live by? Chat among yourselves, think. So this would be the first step in this process of what I'm proposing for your Advent reflection. You know, we actually do lots in Lent, but we forget to pay attention to Advent, so this is a particularly nice moment. So here are a couple of things from my life about my code of conduct. Okay, one I learned from my dad. I grew up in the suburbs of New York City. My dad had a job with the telephone company. I'm 68, so it was a long time ago, and I got to go to his office one day a year, well, 2, Christmas and another day. And I had my best dress on and my little white socks and my patent leather shoes, and I was in my dad's office, and we were leaving, and as we're walking out, we bump into a janitor, and my dad stops to talk. And here, it's a little kid looking up at him. My dad knew that man's name. He knew his wife's name. He knew the name of his kids. He knew what that man was doing, what he was worried about, what he was celebrating. And we stood there and we talked for a while. And I can tell you now, my own children have commented to me that I give people undivided attention. And that whoever it is, in fact, when they're kids, they would get mad because I'd talk to the cashier at the grocery store too long. But I set it as a goal that the human being in front of me was my person. And I feel just like you did, I'm living up to what my dad did. I'm still trying to do what my dad taught me to do. In fact, the man was very consistent. I'll say just another story. I was dating a boy in high school he did not like. N-O spells no. Did not like this boy. But we lived in an odd little hilly corner just across the Hudson River. And when people came to visit, it was very hard to get back on the thruway. And so my father would take any visitor, cousin, family, friend, he would lead them with his car to the underpass where then he would get out of the car and point up and people would know, loop up and go on the thruway. And my gosh, my dad would take Dave to the thruway. And I think, he'd probably leave him in the woods if he could. But so when I try to live every day, I've got that model from my dad. But I'll also just tell you a little something about my mom. We were talking, there you are. We were talking about my mother before. So my mother was an Irish immigrant, came to the United States when she was 19, had a 9th grade education, was a housewife till my father and mother discovered there was not enough money for college. I never heard the meeting. All of a sudden my mother had a job cooking in a convent nearby. And in our dining room on the top of the hutch was a red wallet. It was the Mad Money wallet. And if I wanted to go to the movies when I was a kid, somehow my mother always had cash in the Mad Money wallet so I could go to the movies. And you could ask my kids, do I ever give them Mad Money? Absolutely. I think you were talking about happiness. Finding the joy in life, remembering to have fun. remembering to take a little bit of your money and just enjoy life. So, and I would encourage you in this season of Advent to start paying attention to your strengths. You have your own values, you have your strengths. These are hard times. So you want to dig into that. You want to be very conscious of them. And this season of Advent is a wonderful time. And now the next step for us is we're going to talk about how to build on those strengths. So you already have them, and now we want to take them a step further. So this leads us to a dilemma, though, of the world around us. What am I supposed to do? I would prefer to do nothing. Can I just hunker down and live in my own private world with my job and my church, my community, my family and friends? The world's problems are overwhelming. Can I just step away? J.R.R. Tolkien, a Roman Catholic 20th century British author, wrote The Lord of the Rings. And he wrote it between 1937 and 1949. And just imagine the bombing of London and the war raging. It's a mythic battle of good and evil with a wide array of creatures, human beings, hobbits, goblins, and elves. Young, innocent Frodo, a hobbit, is tasked with an overwhelming responsibility to challenge the evil Sauron. He's sitting completely discouraged, and he turns to the wizard Gandalf and he says, "I wish the ring had never come to me. I wish none of this had happened." And Gandalf answers, "So do all who live to see such times, but it's not for them to decide. All we have to do is decide what to do with the time that is given to us." So, and our church would say the same thing. We cannot turn away. We have to ask ourselves, how can I make things better for myself, for my family, for my neighbors, for my community, and for the world at large? We cannot turn away. We cannot shut our door because there's so much suffering, and we can't handle it. We don't want to handle it. But for believers, for people with spirit, for faith, for Catholics, for anyone of faith, we can't turn away. But we do what we can do. And so therefore, I want to propose an Advent practice for you. From now till Christmas, mind, body, spirit, which is the holistic way that Catholic spirituality works. Mind, body, spirit. First, with mind, I offer you 3 ideas: experience, study, and an openness to change your mind. Experience, study, and an openness to change your mind. Dig into your own life experience. You have acquired wisdom. Take a step back in situations and consider what you know to be true. Example. I'm walking into Walmart on a Saturday. There's a busload of young men, Mexican farm workers, piling off the bus, heading into Walmart. They're laughing and talking. They're hilarious to watch in the store. and they grab bags of stuff as they leave. Those are my Mexican immigrants. And that's what I experience. And my experience is valid and real. And you have experience. You've lived through a lot. You know a lot of people. You know, you've seen things at work. You've seen things in your neighborhood. Trust your experience. Sky is blue, grass is green. Trust your experience. Secondly, study. Catholic Church has perfected a love of education. There's schools here that belong to the church. The universities built in medieval ages in Europe had Catholic theologians and intellectuals working there. The heritage of Catholic life respects the intellectual life. Math, science, business, art, reading, writing, lecturing. We have a love of the intellectual life. And when you encounter frightening and threatening situations, you think to yourself, I need to learn something about this. And again, college professor here, go to the correct resources. I was scared beyond words about the hurricane in my community. And I need to understand more about hurricanes, if only just to prepare myself to endure the next one. So go to the resources, the experts. I have no training in business whatsoever, but I understand some things about inflation now. I understand why grocery prices have become so high. I've learned about avian flu, bird flu, that's killed off the chickens. I know that the Red Sea blockades by the Houthi rebels have stopped shipping container ships from crossing the fastest, cheapest path to get food to us. Ukraine at war, its corn crops and its wheat crops have failed, and people in Africa are hungry. Take advantage of the human wisdom in the community and don't be overwhelmed, but empower yourself. I have recently learned that the coral reefs that are dying, scientists are experimenting with vitamins, and they think the vitamins might revitalize the coral reefs. So we can't say, I don't want to know. We have to say, I can know, and I will learn things, and my understanding will make me more capable of being helpful. And in a simple way, like, I can't cure cancer. I don't know how to do that. But if I respect and understand the scientists working on the drugs and the treatments, if I offer my prayers up for them, if I'm in solidarity with the work they're doing, then I am doing my part. So study. The things that are frightening you, study them. Then openness to change your mind. Going back to what I was talking about at the very beginning, there are millions of people in this country that are not thinking the way you did, whichever way you went in the vote, whatever your angers or frustrations or fears are, there are millions of people in this country that are not in the same place. So how do you manage that? So there's a group called the Search for Common Ground. They're a peace-building organization. I actually did a lecture 10 years ago on this topic, and I found my old notes. I thought, this is sad. That I still need these conflict resolution notes. But here's what they said. They said, go from positions to interests. So look beyond the position that you take and look for your underlying hopes, concerns, motivations, and fears that inform it, that power it, that make it. Think about why you feel that way. What do you want? What are you worried about? What do you need? How did you get to that point of taking that position? And then from there, you engage in a conversation with someone else, and you're not looking to defend your position. You're looking to see who they are. What are they worried about? What do they love? What do they want to do? Where are they going? And open yourself up to the possibility that you can see things differently and build a bond with someone. And I can tell you, it can be globally or in your own neighborhood or with your own family. I tell you, I am wrestling, my soul is wrestling with what is going on in Gaza. Because I was raised in an Irish Catholic neighborhood in New York. I knew survivors of the Holocaust. I went to Dachau. And the moral purity of the experience of the people of Israel, I never doubted. And now this government is waging a war. People are starving and dying. And in some ways, I don't even know how to deal with that. I always had a clear sense. And now I am struggling to make sense of the world that I knew. And I am an unfinished mess on this question. But I know I have to. I know I have to. So with some of these big, complicated problems, we really have to wrestle. And this openness to change. Now, any of you in the room that have been married for more than a while, saying you're sorry is a life skill. Without it, I don't know who can survive being married. You're laughing, but you know it's true. I was wrong, I'm sorry. It's a life skill, we learned it. We learned it as kids when you punched your brother. You know, you had to own up. So, in this Advent experience, when the world is suffering so much, dig into your experience, think and learn about things that are upsetting and frightening you so that you can feel strong. I look at this website called Good News. It's on my iPad. I have learned so much about the efforts in ecology that you never hear on the evening news. And so there you go, Good News, iPad. And again, I am a big fan of a 19th century theologian, not to bore you with old theology, John Henry Newman. He would pray to be able to think something new. Let us make it our prayer and our intention. So let us make it our intention to open our minds. Our intention to take a second look at a situation and try to think differently. Maybe we can't do it instantly, but this is a long 4 weeks. You can make some progress. So mind, body, charity. Catholics perfected it as an art form. We love charity. Don't we? Absolutely. So do something to help people. Give your time, your listening ear, your expertise. Give your money, give your belongings. And as you do that charitable action, make it into a prayer. Your very action is bringing goodness and grace into the world. You can be an extraordinary person and witness to your faith by physically doing something to help another human being. And we eat, we sleep, we need warm clothes. People need stuff. And people need the smart ideas in your brain that you've learned through your life. You can share that. But as you do it in Advent, I would say intentionally turn it into a prayer. By this action, just like we receive communion, through this action, we receive the grace of God. In this action, I am making goodness into the universe. And last, Spirit, light a candle. Light a candle. The Advent candles are a powerful image of God's presence, and an image that Jesus often uses in his parables. Light a candle in your home, light a candle at church, and be a light to others, just like you said. Smile, your laughter, your generosity in giving your time, and your attention to someone else, that's light in the darkness. Sitting down with someone who adamantly opposes your faith and sticking in that conversation, that is grace in the world. And I want to say that one of the most powerful experiences I've ever had in my life about this, another job, another community, another era of my career. I'm a hospice chaplain in Auburn, Alabama. I'm the only chaplain for the hospital, and we cover a 50-mile radius around Auburn. And one of my patients, his lung cancer has gotten terrible, and he's alone, and so he's moved into his sister's trailer somewhere in the countryside. And the nurse came to me one morning and said, "This man is in a lot of pain. You should go see him today." So I took off in my car and got lost, as only I can get lost. So it took me a while. I found the trailer, and I park my car, and I prepare myself mentally and spiritually for the encounter. And as I get out of my car, I see this front door open, and my patient is there, and he is literally bent over in pain. And as I step towards the trailer, he reaches down to me because the handrail is broken. And he's afraid I'm going to fall on the stairs. And I just looked at him. I was astonished. It was so beautiful. And I thought, you're dying of cancer and you're worried that I'm going to fall on the stair? That's your top priority? That was a saint. And that's the miracle of faith. That we can be light in the darkness. And the darkness cannot cover us. And that just our candle selves can make the world a better place. And so that's my challenge to you. You know, in this evening together, we've honestly faced what's going on in the world around us. And now I challenge you in this Advent time to grow spiritually, to become a smarter person about these problems, to trust the values that you have right now, and then to have an intentional Advent through your mind, through your body, and through your spirit. Be a candle in the darkness. All right, and let's end with a prayer. Pope Francis wrote an encyclical recently called Fratelli Tutti about being a friend to the world. So let us bring ourselves intentionally in prayer, quiet our hearts. Let us pray. Loving and gracious God, you created all human beings equal in dignity. Inspire in us a dream of renewed encounter, dialogue, justice, and peace. Move us to create healthier societies and a more dignified world. A world without hunger, without poverty, without violence and war. In this season of Lent, may we be light to the world. Amen. Thank you very much.